Hello, everyone. This is Abhishek Saraf. I have secured All India Rank 8 in UPSC Civil Service Exam of 2019. And this was my fourth attempt and third selection, third interview at UPSC Civil Service Exam. In this lecture, in this free lecture by Unacademy, I will be unraveling the techniques and secrets that I followed, the techniques that enabled me to do reasonably well in UPSC Civil Service Exam interview. This is the part two of a four-part series. And in the previous part, I covered the basics. This is the basic about my profile, the scores that I got in previous year's interview that I attempted at UPSC. I emphasize that you have to develop your own strategy, regardless of what I say. One size will not fit all. You have to realize what works for you, what are your strengths and weakness, do a SWOT analysis on yourself, realize that what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, where can you capitalize, and what are the problems that you need to negotiate with, what are the problems that you need to avoid, so that you can get a good score in UPSC interview. Like I said, I've been saying this for some time now. When I was starting my preparation for civil service exam, I read on a blog that the exam is like a martial art. Every master have to develop his or her own style. So without much further ado, I'll share my strategy, and then you can adopt elements from that strategy of whatever is helpful for you, customize it as per your own strengths and weakness, and then hopefully it will help you do better in the interview. In the previous lecture in this series, I covered regarding why do we need to prepare for the interview. If it is going to be a representation of my own personality, why do I need to even prepare for it in the first place? The reason is that it is your job to depict the qualities that UPSC wants to see in you. They might not be able to get a 360-degree opinion of you, but then the partial opinion that they do get, it is your job to depict the desirable qualities in that opinion that they make of you. You have to know the desirable qualities. You have to prepare for HR questions, for current affairs questions, for DAF questions, as well as for situational questions. You have to develop a basic level of expression and etiquettes that is expected. For HR questions, once again, you have to have your reasons straight. You have to do introspection, and then you have to balance a presentation. You can't be too idealistic. You have to be realistic, but then you can't be very blunt. You can't be very dull or boring. You have to balance those qualities that UPSC wants to see in you in your answers. How you prepare for current affairs, why you prepare for current affairs were covered. How do you prepare for DAF? What are the qualities that UPSC wants to see in you? These are the qualities from UPSC's notification. UPSC has mentioned these qualities in its very own notification. And these are the simple interpretation of those qualities that I have developed over the years with my experience. It is your job to depict as many qualities of these as possible in your DAF, in your answers, in the interview room. This is the final aim of the preparation of how you want to be perceived as after the end of the interview. You want to be perceived as positive person. You want the interview to form a positive opinion of you. And you want them to form a dominantly positive opinion of you. They might not be able to form an exclusively, completely positive opinion of you. Some answers might go wrong, but then they will not judge you on one answer that might not have been the best, one answer that might not have been the optimum. They will judge you on how overall they feel about you. But if you do a blunder, if you're caught lying, that dominant positive impression go haywire regardless of how many good answers you do. So one answer can do very bad impression for you. One answer can generate a very bad impression for you if that is a cardinal blunder. But then if one answer is suboptimal, don't prejudge your interview. Don't feel very little about your own performance. Feel positive about your performance as a holistic picture rather than just 1 point, one answer, unless and until that one answer is a blunder. I mentioned about two types of DAF. There's an entire spectrum. One side is aggressive, other side is defensive DAF. Depending on your academic profile, depending on your job profile, depending on your extracurricular activities, your DAF might fall somewhere on the other on this axis. My DAF was somewhere here. There have been more aggressive DAF. There have been more diversified DAF, and there have been much less diversified DAF. I discussed the pros and cons of aggressive and defensive DAF. This is an example of my own DAF. It has been characterized as an aggressive DAF. Finally, I discussed about how to fill the DAF. The basic idea is that you should know the qualities that UPSC wants to see in you. You should portray those qualities in your DAF. Here, the DAF filling ends. You should deliver on those qualities in the interview room. The interview board should feel that there is a consistency between how you have represented yourself on paper and how you come across in the interview room. There has to be a consistency between these two things. And if you are able to develop and show a consistency between these two things and show the qualities that UPSC expects to see in you, it will get converted into score. I briefly touched upon how you will prepare places in your DAF. The place where you were born, the place you did your graduation from, and the place you were posted, you were living, and when you are employed. Similarly, you have to also prepare the places of the birth of your father and mother. How will you prepare for a graduation subject? How will you prepare for an optional subject? And what UPSC judges when they ask you topics, when they ask you questions about your graduation subject. Even if they don't ask you questions from your graduation subject, still you can show a deep knowledge of your subject. You can show the passion of your subject by incorporating ideas from your subject into your answers. How will you prepare for your college? How will you prepare for the organization that employed you? What is the role of awards, teams, positions of responsibility, sports and hobbies, and NCC, or something like that, which you fill in this place? Why is UPSC asking you these things in the first place, and how you will use them to your advantage? Some miscellaneous things that have to be kept in mind while preparing for the DAF, like important events of date of birth, persons with same name as you, persons born on the same day as you, persons born on the date of interview. Basic idea is that you have to Google every word. You have to have some knowledge about everything that has been mentioned in your DAF. You have to collect conversation starters. You have to have clear ideas about why you opted for a service, why you opted for a cadre, or other way around. The final aim for the preparation of the DAF is that you should come across as a person who is deeply aware and engaged with the things that have been mentioned in the DAF. You should come across as a knowledgeable, inquisitive, aware individual, as a compassionate individual, as a dynamic individual, as an honest and an humble individual. And if you are able to do that through your answers as well as on paper, you are able to engage the board in an intellectually stimulating conversation, then you can expect for a good score in the interview by leaving a dominantly positive impression in the interview on the board. If you are able to convert those qualities that you understood that the board wants to see in you, if you're able to portray those qualities on paper, and if you're able to deliver them in your answers, it will directly convert into a positive impression, and a positive impression will convert into scores. So now in this talk, we will see how the second aspect of questioning that you'll face in the interview can be covered. The first aspect of questioning was DAF. Second aspect of questioning was current affairs. Third aspect of questioning is HR. And the fourth aspect of questioning is situational questions. So how did I cover current affairs for the interview? See, current affairs for interview and current affairs of mains is not entirely different, but they are different in some aspects. For example, the current affairs, the topics that were in news yesterday or in the week before will become very important for your interview. See, please realize that interview is a targeted conversation. It is a directed conversation. And how can a conversation be struck? It is for the board members to initiate that conversation, and it is for you to carry that conversation forward in an interesting manner. How will the board members initiate the conversation? If they're going to initiate a conversation in current affairs, it is logical to expect that the conversation will be initiated on something that will be then in their recollection, will be in their memory. And what will be in their recollection? Something that was in news either yesterday or a week ago, or something from your DAF might remind them of a news that was appearing maybe 1 month ago, 2 months ago, or 4 5 months ago. Something like that will be covered in current affairs. Previous week's news or something from your DAF that was in news a couple of months ago. So one more thing, you have to go through the newspaper much more comprehensively for the interview as compared to the mains. Why is that? Because some factual information that might become a conversation starter can appear in the interview. For example, Monetary Policy Committee conducted its meeting yesterday. It gave a report. GST collections for a particular month were in news yesterday. The figure came, and maybe revenue secretary gave his comments on the GST collections. Something in the field of India-US relations was in news yesterday, and a couple of initiatives were mentioned. So the UPSC board member might recall those initiatives and start talking to you about it. So you have to cover the newspaper quite comprehensively. The other way around is that when you're writing an answer in mains on India-US relations, you might skip these three initiatives that were mentioned because you have n number of factors to consider, write, and cover while writing that answer. So it is not necessary for you to cover these three initiatives in your answer unless and until it has been asked in the question. But then when UPSC interviews are going on and the interviewer recollects these three initiatives because they were in news yesterday, they will start talking to you about it, and you cannot but know these initiatives if you have to engage them in a conversation. You cannot, please do not expect to bluff the UPSC board members. They are very knowledgeable people, very experienced people. Your body language will reveal the bluff, and if you are caught lying, that is a one-way ticket to next year's prelims. So I mentioned that I took 3 to 3.5 hours to cover the newspaper every day for mains. When interviews rolled around, it increased to 5 to 6 hours. Why? Because you have to read the newspaper much, much more thoroughly to be able to detect things that I just mentioned, like something that was in news yesterday might not be important for mains. You might be able to write a decent enough answer in mains without even covering those points. It does not matter what the GST collection in February was. If your interview is in February, it does not matter what the GST collections in February was when mains is happening. But then if GST collections were released on 21st February for the month of January, and your interview is on 23rd February, and some analysis was given regarding why the GST collections have been the way they were, then you have to know this analysis. Similarly, if the GST Council meets one day before your interview and its findings are in news, these findings might not at all be relevant for mains because these things might become irrelevant, and these things might be very specific. These things might cover very specific aspects, but then for interview that might become a talking point. For example, if GST was reduced on a certain product and it was due to a public demand, there was huge public outcry to reduce GST on a particular product, so the interview board member might start talking to you about that product and what are the social implications, why was there a public demand, whether the GST should have been reduced, or are there certain other things on which GST could be reduced. This thing could become a whole area of conversation in your interview. But then this is not as relevant for mains because by that time, this issue would have been superseded by several other important issues. So I diversified my learning base. I diversified my sources to cover current affairs very much more comprehensively. And that also reflected in the amount of time that I used to devote for current affairs for interview. Then, apart from the newspapers, I followed several online sources, several daily analysis that were posted by people on YouTube to be able to cover the background of the news that is there today. For example, if particular organization was in news, I need to know a little bit about that organization. For example, whether it is a constitutional body, who heads that body, whether it is a statutory body, what have been the previous initiatives of that body. Something of that persuasion should also be known to me so that I'm not found wanting in the background should the interview member start a conversation regarding it. Then we do not just care about the status of the schemes when we are preparing for the mains or the prelims or something that has been in news a lot. Only those things get covered in prelims and mains. But then in the interview, the board members might straightforward ask you that what is the status of the scheme. For example, Abhishek, you're a civil engineer. What is the status of Bharat Mala initiative? How much length of roads has been built? Which phase of Bharat Mala is going on? What is the status of Sagar Mala? What is the status of Chenab railway bridge project? How much progress has it made? So status of government initiatives becomes quite important. Rajya Sabha TV becomes very important to be able to form well-rounded argumentative opinions, rationally formed opinions, because experts are invited, they give their feedback, and a debate happens, and then some conclusion, some finding is seen in that debate. The anchor of the debate gives the summary at the end. These things can become directly points for you to use in the interview to support your opinion. Like I mentioned in my previous video, a rational opinion has to be developed. And how do you develop a rational opinion? By analyzing the pros and cons. How do you make a comprehensive list of pros and cons? By following online sources like this, like the daily news analysis that are hosted on YouTube channels by various people, like opinions that are voiced by experts in discussions and debates like Rajya Sabha TV, and then All India Radio. The Honorable Prime Minister conducts a show called Man Ki Baat. Sometimes it might happen that before your interview, the very day before your interview, the Honorable Prime Minister delivered an address on Man Ki Baat and he aired some idea. What might happen is that the UPSC interviewer might pick that very idea which the Honorable Prime Minister emphasized upon and then start talking to you about it. And if you did not hear that Man Ki Baat, it might come across as that you are not an aware individual. That the UPSC interview might said that did you not hear Man Ki Baat? The Honorable Prime Minister said something like that yesterday. So it becomes a sticking point in your interview. It becomes a rough point in your interview that you are not able to engage with the examiner. And to be able to generate a dominant positive impression on the examiner, you have to be able to engage in the conversation that they're trying to strike up with you. Then speeches of president, vice president, honorable prime minister, honorable chief minister, constitutional authorities. These things, the Republic Day address, the Independence Day address, they become very important. Even if your interview is in Feb, it has been happening that the board member might remember what the Honorable Prime Minister said in his address on Independence Day. And then they might start a conversation that, didn't you hear the speech that the Honorable Prime Minister delivered on the Independence Day? Something like that can happen. So it is advisable to keep up with the speeches of the Honorable President, Vice President, Prime Minister, and the Chief Minister of your state. That is how you cover current affairs. The basic idea is that please realize whatever can be a conversation starter from current affairs has to be something that you cover. It can be something that was in news yesterday, which might not be important in the long term, but is important today as a conversation starter, has to be covered. And then you don't just have to know the news as current affair, but also the background of it. For example, I mentioned about the Monetary Policy Committee. Let us assume that the Fiscal Stability Development Council met on the day before your interview. So the interview board might start asking you by do you know who is the chairman of the Fiscal Stability Development Council? Do you know what are the findings? And then they might segue into deeper GS questions by starting the conversation with this particular one topic. So how I read newspaper for the interview. First, I followed online sources. There are several websites which host summaries of editorials of newspapers that I followed. I followed the Hindu, I followed Indian Express, I followed Times of India editorials. I'm sorry, I followed editorials from the Hindu, the Indian Express, and Times of India. Why I did so? See, Times of India is generally not advised to be followed for mains, but it is a common knowledge that UPSC board members and UPSC members themselves, the chairperson of whatever board you will get for interview, they are reading Times of India. So what might happen is that Times of India might have covered certain news that these two newspaper might have missed, and then the board member might start talking to you about that, and you might be blindsided that I did not even follow that news. So what the board member might say is that do you not follow the news? Do you not read the newspaper? Now you cannot say, sir, I do read the newspaper, but in my newspaper it was not covered. This is an excuse. You cannot say that. The best you can say at that point of time, sir, I do read. I'm sorry, sir, I'm not aware of the issue that has been mentioned, but I'll look it up. It has escaped my attention. Thank you for bringing it to my notice. That is the best thing you can say at that point. But then you cannot criticize the newspapers that you are following. Otherwise, it looks badly on you that if the newspapers are not good enough, why are you following them? As simple as that. It looks badly on you. So the way I did was that several online sources host summaries of editorials. I covered them first. Then I picked up the editorials of the Hindu, and then the explained and editorials of Indian Express. and then the news back again from the Hindu. I covered those editorials as well as the news that are hosted by online sources. And once I covered them, I picked up the PDFs of the newspapers, the Hindu editorial, Indian Express editorial, and the editorials that were covered by these online sources could have been skipped safely if you are following reliable websites. Similarly, the news that are hosted by these websites, if you have covered a particular news item from these websites, you can safely skip the news from the Hindu or the Indian Express if you have covered the news from these websites. Then the Hindu, in my experience, hosts short and sweet news in a concise manner. Indian Express sometimes can be a little bit verbose. So what I did was that followed an editorial, followed these websites, covered the editorial, covered the daily news, and then covered the Hindu editorial, covered the Indian Express editorial, covered the Hindu news, and then whatever was left, whatever was skipped, was covered from Indian Express. And lastly, in 20 to 25 minutes, I would cover the Times of India. It is advisable to follow the Times of India of your place of origin. For example, I used to follow the Times of India Bhopal edition. But in the last week, it is advisable to follow the Times of India Delhi edition as well, because the interview board members might pick up the Delhi edition. They might have been reading the Delhi edition. They might pick up questions from the Delhi edition of the Times of India. So it is advisable to follow both these editions, the place of your origin as well as the Delhi edition for Times of India. Now, HR questions. I mentioned that there are 4 types of questions. One is DAF, one is current affairs, one is HR, and other is situational question that you will face in the interview. No question will be beyond this remit. You will be facing only these 4 questions. Any question that you face in an interview can be categorized into these 4. But then please understand what is an HR question. It is a human resource question. It is a question about you. The keyword will be you in that question. You will have to talk about yourself, what you did in school, what you did in college, what you did in job, what were your positions of responsibility, what are the award achievements, and what are your hobbies, why you do particular thing, why did you adopt a particular hobby, why do you or why did you join a particular organization, why do you adopt a particular hobby, what did you contribute to that particular organization, how did you initiate a particular project, when did you join that particular organization, when did you decide to join civil service, when did you start preparing for civil service, how did you contribute to the particular project. The basic idea is that they will want to talk about you. They will want to know what kind of a person you are, what are your qualities, what are your thought processes, how do you make a decision, what are your preferences, what are your values. So don't be afraid to talk about yourself. The HR question is basically that. And please realize that since it is demanding to talk about you, you cannot escape. You have to know about you. You have to know your preferences. You have to know your values. You have to have your reasons straight as to why I joined engineering service, why I opted for civil engineering, why I went to IIT Kanpur, why I had relatively less marks in 12th class compared to 10th class, why I am preparing for civil service, why I would like to join the IAS. These things have to be known to you. Nobody else can come and tell you these things. It has to come from you, and you cannot say, sir, I don't know, because it is about you. You have to know about you. So how do you prepare answer for HR questions? What you do is that the best answer for HR question will come from introspection. You have to think about yourself. You have to think about what your priorities are, what your qualities are. And then the best answer after introspection, the best answer can be framed by following honesty, by following uniqueness. Your answer should be unique. You cannot use the cliched words that everybody and anybody has been using. If you are using the answer that 97, 98% of the candidates are using, if you're giving the answer as to why civil service, why Indian administrative service, why Indian police service, why not Indian foreign service, that if you're giving the same answer that 97 to 98% people have been giving, if there is so much cliched words, so much repetition in your answer, then please tell me why you should not be given the marks that 97 to 98% people are getting, or marks in the range that 98 to 97% people are getting. If you want to get unique marks, your answer has to be unique. And HR questions are where you can make yourself stand apart once again. Not just DAF, but HR questions as well. In DAF, your content will make you stand apart. In DAF, your knowledge will make you stand apart. In HR, your honesty, your uniqueness, your passion, your sincerity, your genuineness will make you stand apart. The best way to answer an HR question I mentioned is to introspect yourself first, Have honesty in your answer, have uniqueness in your answer, have genuineness, have sincere passion in your answer. The HR question is an opportunity to show multiple facets of your personality. You can show compassion, you can show honesty, you can show genuineness, you can show sincerity, you can show inquisitiveness. Any quality can be shown in your answers in HR. But then these qualities have to come from introspection. If you introspect and if you don't find a particular quality in yourself, still you try to show it, then passion will be lacking from your answer. Your body language will depict that, and the board will detect that. So introspect, realize which qualities are present in you, realize which qualities can be depicted in which answer. If that is really the case, then frame your answer in a little bit unique manner. Your answer might be something that is common to many people, but still you can frame it in a unique manner. And when you frame it in a unique manner, when you frame a true, honest answer in a unique manner, directly passion will come in your answer. So HR can show your values, HR can show your beliefs. Why I said this line that know thyself, know thy enemy, it is a line by Confucius. It is a quote by Confucius. It says that know thyself, know thy enemy, 1,000 battles, 1,000 victories. Why I said so is that you have to know yourself. You have to know your values. You have to know your preferences. You have to know your ideology. You have to know why about you. Once you know that, you have to know what UPSC expects. You have to know what qualities UPSC wants to see in you. I've mentioned those qualities. This is knowing thy enemy. UPSC is not the enemy. Please don't interpret it that way. But then know thyself, what qualities you have. Know thy enemy, know the target that you want to fulfill. That UPSC wants these qualities in you. Know yourself, introspect, and realize what qualities you have, and then represent it. It is as simple as that. Like I mentioned here, that know the qualities that UPSC want to see in you, know the qualities that you have and portray them, deliver them in the interview, and that will get converted into the score. Know your qualities, know the qualities that UPSC wants to see in you, know the enemy or know that target. Portray, how will you portray? By knowing yourself, by introspecting, and then you will deliver. That will add credibility to your claim that I have a particular quality that you have portrayed in a draft. And then once you add credibility to your claim, it gets converted into score. So that is why I have mentioned here that know thyself, know thy enemy, 1,000 battles, 1,000 victory. And an HR question is exactly what exemplifies that. That can be done in other areas of DAF as well, but then as HR, since it is knowing your own self, depicting as your own self as a desirable candidate, and knowing what UPSC expects from you. So know thyself, know thy enemy is a desirable thing to do. Now, knowing thyself clearly reflects that you have to be clear in your mind. It reflects the clarity in your thought. I've mentioned in the desirable list of qualities that you have to have a clarity of thought. You have to clearly understand what you did, why you did so, and you also have to be clear that what you don't know. I'll elaborate on that. That once you talk about yourself, you should not be lying in it. Your answer should be genuine. Even if you don't know the reason, you should genuinely accept, sir, I didn't know the reason. I'll tell you how. Even if you don't know, accept that. Most people, when they opt for IITs or when they opt for a certain branch, they don't know that branch in depth. Still, they opt for a certain branch. But then it is not a sin to accept to the board. I did so. They asked me that why did you go for civil engineering? I said that when I cracked IIT JEE, I opted for advice from a senior who was in IIT Bombay. He told me that go to IIT Delhi, Bombay or Kanpur. At my rank in IIT Delhi, Bombay or Kanpur, civil engineering, chemical engineering and aerospace engineering were available. Of these three, my preference was for civil engineering. So I will not say in the board that I was always born passionate. I was always a born and passionate civil engineer. No, it was not that. It was not that way, and I would be lying if I said that, and I would be caught lying if I said that. So you can accept that I did not have much knowledge, I did not have much understanding of what my passion was, but then I had to make a decision with that limited knowledge, and I did the best I could to make a decision, even if that was getting advice from someone else without understanding my own preferences. But then that is the best thing I could have done at that time. If I were to go back, I would do more introspection with the knowledge that I have now, and I would make a different decision. I would make a more informed decision. But then at that point of time, when I chose to go to IIT Kanpur civil engineering, I had limited knowledge and limited understanding, and that is a decision what I made. Like I said, why XYZ IIT, why XYZ engineering, why XYZ graduation subject? You can say honestly that I went with the advice from seniors. Why placement before CSE? You can say honestly that I was not motivated enough to prepare for this exam. I was wondering, but then I needed job security. You have to give honest reasons. Even if you don't know, you have to candidly accept that you didn't know. You cannot accept that I don't know now, but for something you did in the past, you can say that I did not know at that point of time, so I made a decision with the resources I had at my disposal. But now at this point of time, when you're sitting in front of the board, you cannot say that I don't know why I have decided to come to civil service. Now you have to be a mature individual. Now you have to be a rationally oriented individual. Now you have to make a decision based on a thought process that is logical, and you have to depict that. You can accept that in front of the board, that earlier I did not have that understanding, but now I have progressed over that. I have developed an understanding. But then at least have a clarity in your mind that when I made a decision without knowledge, I accept that. But now I have made a decision with knowledge, and I can show that, I can portray that. Similarly, why leave FT packages? You have to have clarity in your mind that why am I leaving? Why am I deciding to go for XYZ job? Why leave hefty packages? What I'm saying is that if you are going for civil service by leaving hefty packages, the board might ask that you were earning so well. Why did you go there in the first place if you wanted to go for civil services? And why are you leaving now? You can accept that earlier I did not understand my true inclination. I thought maybe earning hefty packages might make me happy, but then I realized that motivation, I realized my calling, that money is not everything. Money is something, but then I needed more to get satisfaction in life. So I decided to leave that package. So even going for a high paying job is something that you can accept that I didn't know. I didn't have clarity in thought at that time. But now I have clarity of thought. I know clearly that at that point of time, I didn't know. You can accept that in the past, I didn't know. But you can say now that now I do know. That is why I'm here. So to conclude, that past is something you can say that I did not have clarity in thought, but now I have clarity in thought. You can accept that earlier I was not clear, but now I have clarity. That is what you have to depict. Similarly, very important question. Almost everyone of you will face this question in the board or in some or the other mocks, and almost everyone will have to develop an answer as to why IAS. My advice to you would be that you can say the pros of IAS, but don't glorify it. There are several problems in Indian administrative service as well, much like everything else. So don't think that this is the holy grail of everything. Life will be all set after you become an IAS. No, you will face immense challenges and problem after you become an IAS. Then why are you inclined to join civil service? Why are you inclined to join IAS? Your answer should be genuine. There is no negotiating in that. Your answer should be honest. If it is not, interview board will see that, or either they'll see that and not comment on it, and that will reflect in your marks, or they will see that right away and they will grill you and then make you say some or the other answer that will contradict your own previous answer as to why IAS. Let me give you an example. Suppose they asked you why IAS. You say, sir, it is my childhood dream. Had I said that, they would have asked me, then why did you go to civil service? Why did you go to engineering service if IAS was your childhood dream? Right. And then they would ask me that you were so academically inclined in civil engineering, you pursued civil engineering so much that you did research projects in India and abroad, you organized events, and then you also did consultancy projects. Your hobby is also inclined towards civil engineering. If IAS was your true inclination, then why did you not prepare for it in college? Why did you not diversify your learning base beyond the domain of civil engineering? So I will be caught lying if I'm not answering honestly HR questions. But then you can give n number of answers to HR questions, but they have to be genuine. That is what I would advise you. They have to be genuine. They can be n number of reasons. You can show life instances that in childhood I saw XYZ thing, it motivated me to join civil service, it motivated me to contribute. But then I would advise you that if you are giving a childhood story, there has to be some element of maturity in it, because you have grown since the time you were a child. In childhood, you might have realized that you want to go to civil service, but then that time has passed. You have gained more maturity. So add maturity to that childhood story of yours. I would advise you to don't contradict yourself in whatever reason you give. Don't give a reason that your profile will not support. I just gave you an example of my civil engineering profile not supporting my reason that I wanted to be an IS since childhood. It is not true. I did not want it to be an IS since childhood. I would advise you to not give idealistic answers that I want to clean corruption from the country. I want to make India a developed country. Don't give idealistic answers. They are not there to listen to bookish answers. They are there to listen to practical answers. Idealistic answers are generally not true. Even if your answer is something that inclines towards idealism, form it in a practical language. The best kind of answer will come that reflects, that is in alignment, that is in consistency with the kind of qualities that you have reflected in the DAF. If you have if you have shown yourself as an academically inclined person, then something regarding inquisitiveness, something regarding personality development, something regarding an opportunity to learn more should be a reason as to why you want to join the IS. And that is what my reason was. I am an academically inclined person. I have represented myself that way in the DAF. And then when I talked about my reason for joining IS, it was learning at the largest possible scale, applying what I learned, and contributing to the society in the most direct manner. It was as simple as that. It is not as if I was not contributing to the society as a railway engineer, but then the scale of learning, applying, and contributing could have been much larger in Indian administrative service. And I like to learn. I like to apply what I learn. That is why I went to the field. So if there is a consistency between the qualities you have depicted in your DAF and the answer that you are giving, then it is the best kind of answer that you can give in the HR question. Furthermore, I would advise you to avoid cliches like job diversity, work satisfaction, public service, varied challenges. I would advise you to avoid these cliches. Why? Because, like I mentioned, if 97% people are giving the same answer, you'll get the marks that 97% people are getting. If you're fine with that, you can go with the cliches. Otherwise, if you are going with a cliche, if you don't have a better answer, at least have some instances of your life to support this claim that you are making as a reason as you want to join the civil service or IAS. Please realize that why do you want to join civil service and why do you want to join IAS are two different questions. Civil service is more than IAS. There are 24 services on offer to every candidate. So your answer as to why do you want to join civil service and why do you want to join IAS should be different. They might not be entirely different, but then they should have an element of they should have at least one element that is difference. Otherwise, you will get trapped in a contradiction. I'll give you an example. You mentioned that I want to join civil service because there is immense diversity. This might be true for IAS. But then the very next question you will end up facing is that, okay, suppose you are allotted to Indian Railway Protection Force Service or you are allotted to Indian Postal Service. Where is the diversity in that? Unless and until you are able to explain the diversity in that, you will end up either silent or confused in the interview, in front of the interview board, and then your silence will be contradicting your previous statement that there is diversity in civil service. Either be mature enough to be able to sustain the argument of diversity in civil service or form a different reason for civil service and IAS. Please don't give up a mugged up answer. Now, how will you form an answer that is able to sustain the reason of diversity that you just gave to join civil service? The very reasonable thing to do is that you will read the service profiles of various services. There is a PDF that mentions the service profiles of various services on the website of DOPT. Please go through that PDF and elaborate and Google search on those service profiles in the interview. If they ask you that where is the diversity in railway protection force service, postal service, a knowledge of the service profiles of these services will enable you to give a diversified, a knowledgeable answer. Understanding of these service profiles will enable you to sustain your argument better. It will enable you to give a unique answer, and you will end up looking as a aware candidate, as a rationally thinking individual who has made his or her preferences based on some analysis rather than something that you heard from someone. Once again, the best quality, the best answer for why civil service once again will come when you have shown consistency between the qualities you have depicted in the DAF and between the words that you have used in your answer. between the way you have framed your answer. Once again, I would advise you to avoid cliches like work satisfaction, job satisfaction, or varied challenges. These are true, but then these are true in many other services, many other job profiles. So please depict the qualities that you have emphasized upon in your DAF. Please depict the qualities, those qualities in your answer as to why you want to join civil service. Then it is a very important trick that the board members use. What what would you do if you don't join civil service? If you're not selected for civil service exam? See, the maturity of an individual is to realize that every service, every person who is working is contributing something to the society. It is not as if you are not IAS, then you are not contributing to the society. You are contributing as an IAS, you are contributing as an IPS, you are contributing as a teacher, you are contributing as a healthcare worker, you are contributing even as a person, as a reporter or a journalist, you are contributing even as someone who is considered as low in a hierarchy as a cleaner, as a sweeper. Imagine a scenario where there's a strike by all the sweepers in the city. How dirty would the city be? So please don't think that people who are not IS, IPS are not contributing to the country. They are. So if you say that I will continue with my current job, and then your body language drops, your tone drops, you almost become sad, then it clearly shows that you don't like your job, you think low of your job. What my advice would be that have the maturity to realize that everybody is contributing to the society. It is your personal inclination that makes you think that you will be more productive in IS, but that does not mean that job is better than certain other job. No, it is you whose inclination is more towards IS because you think that you will be more productive, you will be more engaging, you will be more happy serving there rather than thinking that this is a good job, that is a bad job. This is not the attitude to take. I would advise you to avoid this attitude. And you might not use the words that this is an inferior job, that is a superior job. You might not use the words in the interview, but you are conscious enough that way. But UPSC board will judge your attitude through these things. Suppose you're a teacher and then you have gone for civil service interview, and then the board member asks you that, okay, if you're not selected for civil service, what will you do? You suddenly become depressed, your shoulders drop, and you say that I'll continue as a teacher. But then if your tone is not enthusiastic, it will clearly show that you think low of teachers. You think that IS is a better job. You might think that you are more suited to IS, you are more happier serving in IS, you will be more productive in IS, you will probably be more satisfied in IS. But then that does not mean teachers are not important. You would not have been sitting in the interview room had it not been for the teacher. So what I would have said that I very jovially, very happily, I would have said that I would continue with XYZ organization. And then civil service exam has been a very rewarding journey for me. I will learn from the shortcomings that kept me from clearing this exam, and I will bring those learnings to whichever organization I am in. That is what I would have said if not if you are not selected for civil service. Once again, many people do not opt for Indian Foreign Service, but then if you are asked as to why you are not opting for Indian Foreign Service, you cannot give a lie as a reason. That, sir, my family is in India. I cannot be posted in USA. Why? Please realize that there are flights that are connecting almost every country in the world with India. No country is more than 36 hours away. So distance is no longer a factor. If you say that distance, then please realize that it might take you longer to come from Tripura to Kerala than it might take you to come from USA to Kerala. So distance is no longer a factor. With internet, you can be connected with your family in real time. So you cannot give distance or family as a parameter. You have to have real reasons as to why you are not opting for Indian Foreign Service, why you have preferred Indian Foreign Service below IPS. And please realize that you cannot belittle any service. Indian Foreign Service is a very important service. The diplomats that they're working get to work at an international scale. What the work they do changes the course of history. So why I'm mentioning this particular service? Because a lot many candidates do not opt for Indian Foreign Service, but then have honest reasons. If it is power that you are after, and then you think that CRPC, CPC gives powers to magistrates and police officers, then Indian Forest Service do not have power, they do not have public interface, then this is a very negative interpretation of Indian Forest Service or Indian Foreign Service. I'm sorry. So have honest reasons, understand what the service is about, and then make a decision. Otherwise, you will be caught lying in the interview board, and then you will be you will find yourself writing the next prelims. HR questions is where you cannot be found lacking, you cannot be found lying, and you cannot be found lying anywhere for that matter. I have mentioned time and again that don't belittle, don't criticize anything in the interview. If you're going to criticize anything, it should be constructive criticism. You should have an attitude of improving things. If you are going to criticize something, you should have a vision of improving things. Don't just be a cynical critic. Don't criticize your current job or research or anything. Why I'm saying so? Because that shows immaturity, that shows pessimism, that shows that you don't have a positive approach towards things. Why it shows immaturity? That if you are a researcher, if you are doing a particular job and then you are criticizing that job, then you probably did not introspect enough when you joined that particular job. If you don't like that job, if you think that job is not worth doing, if you think low of that job, then why did you join that job in the first place? It is a contradiction that either you are lying, if you're that either your criticism is not genuine, or then your thought process was not correct when you joined that job. So don't criticize that job. Besides, please realize that a mature approach is that you have to accept that every job is contributing. You might not have the inclination for a particular job, that is fine, but that does not mean that that job is not worth doing. People are doing it, people are doing every job, and people are contributing through various jobs. So don't criticize any job. It shows a backward looking attitude. It shows fickle mindedness, that you are not steadfast, you are not sincere, and you are not firm with your decisions. If you felt bad about a job, why did you join it in the first place? Or it might reflect that you liked that job when you joined it, but then you ended up disliking it. So it shows that you're a fickle minded person, you are not firm person, you are not able to stick with your decisions. Once again, it shows disloyalty, that you are not representing your organization in a particular manner, in a positive manner outside that organization. And this shows disloyalty to your organization. Please don't criticize your organization like that. The best you can do is that you can say positive things about what you are aspiring for, but don't anything. Don't belittle your organization. You can say that a particular job, a particular profile is more to my suiting, more to my liking, but then that does not mean other jobs are bad. What can it mean is that I think I'm more suited, I think I'll be more productive at a particular job. Similarly, exactly similarly for college, you have a lot that you owe to your college, you have a lot that you owe to the place that gave you a graduate degree. Please don't make excuses that this is bad, that is bad, college does not teach me things, that is why I don't know things. No, college contributed to your life, it was your decision to join that college. Please don't make excuses like that. Exactly same for the city. There might be n number of things lacking in the city, but then there are n number of things that are good in the city of your hometown, of your parents place of birth as well. Don't criticize, say positive things, have a constructive criticism approach. If you're going to criticize that, okay, things are lacking, but then that is how they can be improved. The one of the most important HR questions that you will face in the interview is that, okay, give me a story of your past failure. They don't care if you failed. Everybody fails. I have not never met a person who has not met some or the other failure in life. But then it is not something that they want you to live through for nothing. They don't want to live through your pain. They don't want to recollect. They don't want you to recollect your pain for nothing. What they want to see in the interview is that you face failure. That must have been because of some or the other mistake that you made. Okay, you make mistakes. It is human to make mistakes. But then, what were the learnings that you drew from that failure? It is a dialogue from the Batman movie that why do we fall? We fall to get up. That is what the UPSC board wants to see, that you fell, you made a mistake, but then what learning did you do from that mistake, and how did it add to your personality, and how you developed further as an individual? Because if you develop further as an individual because of a failure, then it is not really a failure. It shows that you are inquisitive, it shows that you are dynamic, it shows that you introspect, it shows that you are progressive. That is what UPSC wants to see in you. So every question, please realize that, please get this in your approach towards the interview, that every question has a purpose in the interview. They might be judging your knowledge, they might be judging your awareness, they might be judging your inquisitiveness, they might be judging your character. Please realize that it is not always the content that is being judged. It is how you develop that content for a particular answer to a particular question that is being judged. They might be judging your honesty through a question in the DAF. They might be judging your optimism through a question regarding climate change. It happened with me in the interview, and I have detailed, elaborated about it, explained that in detail in one another video. Then one of the famous HR questions is that strengths and weaknesses. Abhishek, tell me 5 strengths of yours. Why did they ask me this? They asked me this because they wanted to see what kind of things I see as a strength of mine. And then, are they really something that I have thought about, or are they really something that I'm just going to improvise impromptu? Even if you improvise impromptu, you should be able to justify them based on anecdotes from your life. If you are telling that introspection is my strength, if you are telling that sincerity is my strength, if you're telling that thinking outside the box is my strength, then you should have anecdotes from your life. Otherwise, how did you realize that XYZ thing is your strength? If you don't have anecdotes from your life, it shows that you are just saying something that might sound good. Please try to think logically on it. If you are saying that something is my strength, you might have had some experience that made you realize that this is what I'm good at. This is what contributes to my personality. So, anecdotes are a way to justify what strength you have, and anecdotes, asking for anecdotes, is a way by the UPSC board member to assess the credibility of your answer, assess the truth of your answer. Then it is desirable to show things as your strength that would be needed qualities in a civil servant. I have mentioned time and again that it is your responsibility to depict the qualities that they want to see in you. And strengths, this question is right away an opportunity to show the qualities that would make you a good civil servant, that would enable you to contribute in a positive manner to civil service. Similarly, about weaknesses. Once again, just like strength, you have to have some anecdotes from your life which would enable you to justify why you think a particular thing is your weakness, why you think a particular thing is your weakness, a particular quality is your weakness. But then, if you think a particular quality is your weakness, then you should be able to show that I'm doing something about it. If I know that particular thing is my weakness, I'm doing something about it. I'm not stagnating. I have not given up. Right? If there is a particular problem, you address it. So you have to be ready with improvements I've made or steps I'm taking to improve upon it. If being not being able to recall names of the people I meet is my weakness, then I have to show that I'm doing something about it. Like you must have noticed in even in this lecture that I tend to speak a little bit faster. That is my weakness. So I should be able to explain to the board that this is my weakness. I have narrowed down upon it, but then I'm doing something about it. Please do not try to be over smart. And sometimes this technique is followed by some people that they mention a strength as their weakness. Sir, I'm too sincere. I work too hard. This is my weakness. This is very immature. This reflects very badly on you. And this shows that clearly you are not a sincere person. You're trying to fool the board. You're trying to hide weaknesses of yours. Try to show your strength as a weakness. Please don't do that. This is a technique of a bygone era. If ever it was working, it does not work now. I would advise you to say something as your weakness that is easily noticeable. See, UPSC board is already going to notice certain things as your weakness, which you might not have been able to figure out as of now. But then it is obvious that something that is easily noticeable will be noticed first by the UPSC board as well. So I would advise you to mention as your weakness that is something that is very apparent. That is something that anyone who is talking to you will notice. You must have noted that I mentioned that speaking too fast is my weakness, and you must have noticed that already. That is one of the weaknesses that I mentioned in the UPSC interview. Then, why is it really a weakness? My reason for it is that sometimes when I tend to speak too fast, I come off as if I'm scolding or shouting at people when I might not have been even agitated. But then that is a tempo at which I speak. And then people feel negatively about me that I'm yelling at them. So it affects my interpersonal relationships without even me intending to do so, without even me being angry, without even me realizing that it has happened. So it becomes a weakness. And interpersonal relationships are quite important in a workplace as well as in personal life. But then point number 2 is that if you're mentioning something as a weakness, it should be improvable. You should be able to give a solution upon how you are improving upon your weakness. You should be able to give a solution as to how you are improving upon your weakness. Some course of action should be there. It shows that I'm a cognizant person. I think about my weaknesses and then I improve upon them. Overall preparation for the interview, I would suggest that it is a little bit different from mains. How is it different? For prelims, it is completely factual. You have to remember facts, and there are n number of sources you can get facts from. For mains, it is analytical. You have to have pros, cons, and solutions. You can cover that. You can develop that from standard material. You can develop that from current affairs notes. You can make your own notes. You can develop that by reading books. And then after you have a decent understanding of things, you will be able to answer questions like that. But, and sometimes people have discussion groups going on for mains as well. But then when it comes to interview, I would advise you to, without exception, without failing, form a discussion group of 3 to 5 members. Why do I say so? Because in a discussion group, what you will do is that you will pose questions to each other like the way you will be facing in mock interviews and like the way you will be facing in UPSC interview. You will speak in turns in a way you will be talking in the interview. You will try to simulate the interview as closely as possible. You will try to develop the habit and the style of speaking that you will need to have when you are facing the interview. You will try to develop that formal language that you will need to speak in the interview. You will try to develop how you present balanced opinions. You will try to develop the tricks that I will elaborate upon in the next couple of lectures. You will try to develop these things in the discussion group. Now, why I have mentioned 3 to 5 people? See, discussion group is where you will try to develop balanced opinions, where you will cross question each other, where you will hammer out an opinion that covers as many facets of a problem as possible. 3 members, it is a little too less. You might face lack of diversity in your opinion. You might not be able to cross question each other that well. 4 members, I think, is optimum. You will get enough diversity and you will get enough time per person to speak. And then after that, if you go for a higher number, you will get diversity, probably. You will get enough knowledge in your discussion group. But then time to speak per member will reduce. 4 people will speak and then you will get a chance to speak. So your practice for speaking will become reduced. So in my opinion, 4 members is an optimum size of a discussion group. Also, one more thing, try to form a discussion group with people who have the same level of knowledge as yourself. Otherwise, they will not. Otherwise, if you form a discussion group with people who have a much smaller knowledge base than you, then you might not be able to develop well-rounded opinions. You might not be able to use your time most productively. So keep this thing in mind, whether or not you have the same knowledge base, all 3, 4 of the people of you, whether or not you have the same knowledge base in the interview, in the discussion group. Then sometimes we might not be as comfortable in speaking in English. We might not be as comfortable in expressing our opinions in English. The clear rule of thumb is that if you're not comfortable doing something, then practice it. There is a 10,000 hour rule that you can become a perfect in 10,000 hours in anything. But fortunately for interview, you don't need to spend 10,000 hours. You can do well with much limited practice. But then there can be several ways to practice presentation and speaking. You can either do a solo practice. What you can do is pick up transcripts from previous years, pick up transcripts from this year's interview that are happening. Several Telegram channels are hosting transcripts. What you can do is either record yourself answering a particular question, listen to your presentation, and then improve upon it, or get your friends, peers, family members, faculty members, mentors, whatever have you, get them to listen to your answer and give you feedback. Or what you can do is look into the mirror and answer a question, because when you are in front of the interview board, you will be answering a question while maintaining an eye contact with the person who asked that question or other persons. So you should be comfortable in answering your questions, you're presenting your opinions in conversation form. So record, that will enable you to improve your delivery. Look into the mirror and answer, that will enable you to improve your conversation delivery. In discussions, once again, you can do speaking practice. Like I mentioned, speak in terms, simulate the interview, deliver in a way you will be delivering in the interview. Then you can do mock interviews. Several coaching institutes are conducting mock interviews. You can go there. That will be the closest simulation that you will have for the interview. You will be sitting in front of 4 to 5 people. You will be dressed in formal. You will be using that language. You will have to adhere to the body language as well. That is required. You will have to adhere to the manners and etiquettes as well. So mock interviews can be a very good practice to improve your speaking skills if you don't have them in the first place, or if they are suboptimal and need improvement. Second is that how do you prepare for the DAF or current affairs? There can be two broad approaches. That first of all, you pick up every term of your DAF. For example, I picked up Bhopal. I picked up IIT Kanpur. I picked up civil engineering. I picked up patents, and then brainstormed. I developed n number of questions that could be asked by the interview board members in that topic and frame answers to those questions. You can brainstorm on probable questions and make answer. That is strategy number one. That is trick number one. That is style number one for preparation. But in my opinion, this is only part one. Why? Please realize that you will frame questions to only those facets of a particular topic that your brain can think of, and you are not knowledgeable completely. You don't know every facet that can be taken from a particular topic. You can frame questions only in those angles that you can think of, and please don't be complacent in thinking that you can explore every angle of a particular topic. You might be missing certain dimensions of a particular topic completely. So don't think that framing questions and answering them, framing most probable questions and developing good answers for them will end your preparation. No, there is phase two to the preparation. Phase two begins with Googling every keyword in your DAF and reading diversified knowledge, reading diversified links about your DAF, about the keywords of your DAF, about the topics that happen in current affairs, about the background of issues of the topics that are happening in current affairs. What I would advise you is that Google keyword, read Wikipedia, read entire page or maybe at least 5 to 10 paragraphs of that topic so that you have a decent level of understanding and knowledge. It might so happen in the interview board that from your DAF, a board member might pick up a keyword, Google it on their phone while you're answering to some other member, read the Wikipedia page and ask you a question. It is completely possible. Sometimes interview board members keep on fidgeting their phone with their phone while the interview is going on. It is possible that they might Google a particular topic and ask you a question. And if you are found lacking in that, it does not look very good. So I would advise you to that in phase one. I would advise you to in phase one, brainstorm questions and brainstorm answers. Get feedback from your peers, faculty members, friends, and then develop answers. Improve answers, depict the qualities that board member wants to see in you, that UPSC boards wants to see in you. Depict those qualities in your answers. Brainstorm on how you will develop a conversation in those questions. That is phase one. In phase two, read about the topics in your DAF. Develop a the comprehensive base of knowledge regarding the background of the topics in your DAF. This will enable you to add quality to your answers. This will enable you to add insightfulness to your answers. This will enable you to add unique content to your answers. So preparation for interview, in my opinion, goes in two directions. One is question and answer format, brainstorming questions, developing answers. Two is reading comprehensively about everything in your DAF, and then to some extent about current affairs, so that you have unique content in your answers. And once you do that, question and answer and content format, what you can do is do permutation and combination amongst the points that you developed here and the content that you read here to make new answers. Once you develop an answers to 20 to 25 questions on a particular topic and read the background content of that topic online, you have enough material from your brainstormed answer and the content that you read to be able to give very insightful, very unique, very engaging, very intellectually stimulating answers. The basic idea is that you have to depict realistically and depict genuinely and sincerely as many qualities as possible from the list that I have shown a couple of times in this talk as well as previous talks. I'll just show that list once again for your reference. In your answers from topics of DAF as well as from current affairs, as well as your brainstormed question, as well as the content that you read, you should be able to depict these qualities. You can brainstorm, you can reiterate, you can develop and redevelop answers of questions that you frame, the questions that you brainstorm, as well as read the content, as well as the content that you read online. You can merge the brainstormed answers as well as the content that you read to develop finally the answers that will enable you to depict as many qualities as possible from these things in your answers. If you are able to maximize these qualities in your answers that the board listens from you, then you will develop a dominant positive impression and you will be able to get good marks in the interview. It is as simple as that. I can give you an example that I brainstormed certain questions regarding railways, and then I read reports of Anil Kakotkar committee briefly, and then Sam Pitroda committee, and then National Transport Development Policy Committee. See, I could have come up with certain questions and I could have developed answers regarding those questions regarding railways. But then I cannot be so arrogant to assume that I have covered every possible aspect. No, there are committees which did intensive deliberations, which did intensive research and came up with a list of solutions. So neither can I assume that I have covered all the aspects that these committees covered, nor can I assume that I have developed in my answers all the solutions that these committees through their deliberations came up with. So a combination of question answer brainstorming and content development will enable you to give unique answers. But then please realize that don't mention committees names in your answers. UPSC board will directly say that I am not here to listen to what committee said what. I know what committee said what. Please give me what you think as the possible course of solution should be, possible course of action should be for a particular problem. What you can do is mention the recommendations of those committees as your solution. This is a good way to go. This will add value to your answer. For example, in CSE 2017, I was asked that should railways be privatized? I said that we could look into it, but before we do that, we have to look into the fact that the railway board has a lot of concentration of power. It is the it is the policy maker, implementer, as well as the regulator. We have to divide it into, we have to divest this power of railway board. We have to separate power of policy formation, implementation, and regulation. And incidentally, even though I gave it as a solution, even though I gave it as a way ahead, it was not my suggestion. It was Anil Kakotkar committee's suggestion. But then I did not mention the name of that committee because I would have been criticized. I would have been probably shunned for mentioning the name of that committee. UPSC board members are not interested in the name of the committee. They're interested in what solution you can give. But then I agreed with the solution. I understood why they are saying so. So I gave it as a solution and I was not cross-questioned on it. Probably it came across as an insightful suggestion, as an insightful comment. And that probably added to a dominant impression, that dominant positive impression I've been talking about. So that is what I'm saying, that I probably could not have come up with this point based on my own brainstorming of content, based on my own brainstorming of questions and answers. But then you have to read a lot of content to add value to your answers, to add uniqueness to your answers. Once you do that, once you devote sufficient time to this thing, you are able to do permutation and combinations and you are able to develop unique answers. Now, I have come across with several people who say that you will be able to recall only 4 points when you talk of the interview, when you talk of an answer in the interview. You will not get more time to say more than 4 points. Then what is the point of making 10 to 15 points in your notes? What is the point of doing that intensive labor? How will it help you? Isn't it just a waste of time? And then there are several people who say that it takes only 1 month to prepare for the interview. But then I mentioned it took me 3 months to prepare for the interview. This is the difference. But please allow me to elaborate on my strategy. I would pick up an issue, collect a list of 10 to 15 points on that issue. Then I would jot down the most insightful and most diverse and most impactful points regarding that particular issue. Once again, coming back to the reference of that CSE 2019 question, that should 2017 question, that should railways be privatized. I could have just mentioned the pros of privatization, that it will lead to better management, technology induction, resource efficiency. It will lead to proper service delivery. It will lead to competition. I could have just gone with that answer. But then everyone, even someone who is not from railways, who has no experience of railways, could have given that answer. And this answer is possible to privatization of anything and everything. That does not add value to your answer. That does not make your answer stand apart. That does not add to a positive impression that you can leave on the interview board. So I would most humbly advise you to avoid such approaches, that in interview you can just give 4 points. So why go for much diverse in-depth study of things? No, you have to jot down insightful comments. You have to jot down diverse points. You have to jot down diverse facets of a problem. You have to explore the diverse facets of a problem, and then you will develop insightful points. So my approach was that read 10 to 15 points, collect diverse points. Then there is approach of mains. I used to mug up 8 to 10 points that are most insightful, that are most impactful, that are most diverse, and then present, depending on your recollection, depending on the time that have been allotted to you, 6, 7, 8 points you can present. And if you are presenting the most impactful, unique, and diverse points, it will naturally lead to an engaging conversation. It will naturally lead to a stimulating conversation. If you are able to build an intellectually stimulating conversation with the interview board, they will naturally enjoy talking to you. And if they enjoy talking to you, they will develop a positive impression of you. I can give you another example as to why I'm emphasizing on doing this, that 10 to 15 points should be read, 8 to 10 points should be jotted down, and then they should be mugged up. And then, depending on the time, you can present 4 to 8 points. Please get out of this myth that you will not be able to speak more than 4 points. You will not be able to speak more than 4 points if you don't have more than 4 points. But then please realize that UPSC boards are very cordial. They are there to listen to you. They will not cut you short unless and until you are not belaboring your point. If you are just going round and round in circles without adding a new content, without adding new point, then they will cut you short, then they will interrupt. Otherwise, they are very cordial. They are there to listen to you. Why are they so inclined to listen to you? Why are they there to listen to you? Why? Because they want to understand your personality. How can they understand your personality without letting you speak? Please note that I gave engineering service exam 2013 interview, 4 members were there. Civil service exam, 3 interviews, 15 members in total. So I have talked to 19 members in UPSC. Out of the 19 members, only 1 member in all the 4 interviews cut my point short. He did not allow me to speak. He was trying to make me say negative things about things. One of his questions was this: why are roads in India crooked? He fed me this line that engineers are not working properly in India. Right, roads in India are so crooked. Why do you think the roads in India are so crooked? So I gave this answer that, sir, there are several reasons. Sometimes it has been seen that roads in India could have had a better alignment, but then there can be reasons like land acquisition. There is a law, and if you are not able to meet the provisions of the law, then you cannot acquire the land. Then there might be topographical reasons, that the terrain might not be favorable to make a road. So they might have had to take an alternative alignment. This might have led to a crooked road. There might be geological reasons, that the rock strata might not have been very favorable to make a road. There might have been chances of subsidence or damages to the road had the road been made there. So they might have to take an alternative alignment. Then can be a reason of there can be a reason for obligatory points. There could have been a reason for obligatory points, that a certain point has to be covered in the alignment of a road. For example, you are going from here to here, but then you have to go from here, but there is a hill. So you go like this, there is a hill here. So you go like this and you go like this. And there is a ghati here, there's a valley here that it cannot be covered. So if this is an obligatory point, you have to take certain alignment. Otherwise, you could have gone just like this. An obligatory point is the point that cannot be avoided. It has to be covered in a particular alignment. So there might be certain obligatory points that have to be covered. Finally, there can be design reasons as well for the roads being crooked. See, in Latian's Delhi, when Sir Edwin Latian was planning the alignment of Delhi, he wanted to follow a grid pattern like it is there in Madrid and New York. But then he was told that Delhi is prone to dust storms, so he consciously decided to adopt a hexagonal pattern of roads. This led to a lot many turn and roundabouts in the roads in Latian Delhi. You might have seen that there are a lot many roundabouts, but then it was by design. Otherwise, had there been straight alignment, then they would have acted as channels for dust storms to develop, and it could have caused public nuisance. So sometimes crooked roads in India are by design as well. That is what I presented as an answer in the interview. And I think that this could have been an insightful comment. This could have been a unique thing that not many people would have said in that answer. Or maybe the board member was not aware. And even if they were aware, they might not have expected me to bring that up as a part of my answer. So if you are able to engage them in an insightful conversation, if you are able to add value to that answer, if you are able to engage them in a intellectually stimulating conversation by the uniqueness of your points, obviously they will feel positive about you. Obviously they will feel that it is an aware, sincere individual, a dynamic individual who is able to relate things that he or she sees around them with the things that with the things that are going on in the current affairs. You are able to form interconnections, you are able to analyze things, and then you are able to present them. So it adds to the impression. And please allow me to draw to your kind notice that Latian's rally point was not something I thought of by myself. It was present in Rajya Sabha TV's Building Blocks of Bharat last 10 minutes of episode 1. But then it was my hobby to watch documentaries about structures. And then when this TV series was launched, I instantly watched it. And then I was able to use it in one of my answers. So that is what it is about. I have mentioned that you should be able to use your hobby as part of your answers. If you are able to do that, then you are able to depict that you have a hobby that adds to your personality. I already mentioned that I had a hobby of watching documentaries about structures, and then I added a point about structures, about roads in India into my answers. So it showed a consistency. It showed that I am open to new content. I analyze that content and I'm able to produce that in my comments regarding things. And that is probably what enabled me to get a score like this in the interview. This is what my marks were in 20th April 2018 interview of CSE 2017. So that is why I put up this slide, that please don't think that UPSC interview is just a matter of 4 points and the first 4 points that come to your mind are the first 4 points that you should be presenting. No, when you're preparing for a particular content, explore as many points as possible. You might not use those points directly in that particular answer. If you are brainstorming an answer to a particular question and you come across 10 points, you might not use those points directly in that question, but you might use those points somewhere else. If you're genuinely, sincerely hardworking, if you're genuinely, sincerely learning content, exploring new content, you might use it somewhere else in an insightful manner, and it might add value to your answer. That might enable you to give a unique answer. And should that happen, it will be a matter of dominant positive impression. So this is what my approach was to develop answers, to develop content. Once again, explore multiple points, jot down insightful points in decreasing order of impactfulness, most impactful point first, and then mug up 8 to 10 points for every issue. Depending on my retention, reproduce 4 to 6 to 8 points. And then these 4 to 6 to 8 points will be the most impactful point first, some other points later, like I gave in the example of roads. In the next lecture, I'll be covering how to develop and how to answer opinion questions, some tricks, some rule of thumb, and some mannerisms that you have to have in your pattern when you are going to appear in the UPSC interview. Thank you very much for listening to me patiently, and good luck.